Today's gospel that I proclaimed was also proclaimed last night at the Easter vigil. And in this Gospel of Luke, in regard to the resurrection, the three women who followed them, that is Jesus, from Galilee down to Jerusalem, where, well, they were shocked, they were dismayed. They witnessed Jesus being crucified, dying on the cross. They saw the sword pierce his side and water and blood flowed out. They knew he was dead. They saw him put in a tomb. And now another day passes before they can ritually remain pure for the Sabbath and go to, anoint the body with spices. They, however, find the tomb open. Now, you need to appreciate the tomb was basically a hewn-out grave, and then there's a channel in front of it whereby they take a huge stone that's bigger than me in circumference and about that thick. It would be the custom. That was the burial custom. You laid someone in the tomb until their body decayed, and then they collected the bones and buried the bones later. They always made sure that the bones were kept in hand and were later burned. A history of the Jewish people would carry their loved ones with them, even if they moved. In Luke's gospel, it's acknowledged that even the likes of Adam was forwarded his bones after he died, and Noah gave them to his grandson as he had him on the ark. And then his great-grandson gave them to Melchizedek, the high priest, at the city of Jerusalem, where, as legend has it, they were buried outside the city wall in a place called Golgotha, the place of the skull. Tradition has it was Adam's skull, and that's where Jesus indeed was crucified, on Calvary. Calvary is the same word as Golgotha, but in the Latin instead of the Hebrew. All this is purposely presented by Luke, the author of this gospel, to try to get people to understand exactly what's happening. Earlier in his gospel, he acknowledges that James, John, Peter all went up to the mountain and watched Jesus there on Mount Tabor be transfigured in their midst. And two other men were with him in dazzling clothes. The same words, behold, two men said to them, behold, they witness Moses and Elijah conversing with Jesus about his pending glorification, the resurrection. It is that which Luke is alluding to in today's gospel. And he does so to acknowledge that throughout salvation history, beginning from the very start with Adam, all the way up to the present day, Jesus has taken upon himself to be the new Adam. He reverses the effects of sin and death caused by, as we hear in the Easter Vigil, O sacred, necessary sin of Adam, O happy fault. For without that, there would not be this day and the joy of Easter and the promise of everlasting life. You see, Jesus wanted us to know, and especially through Luke, that Jesus reversed all the different things of the past. He himself, who is the Word, is from the beginning, the one who created us in his image and likeness, placed us there in what was referred to as paradise, Eden, and thereby he's restoring us so that we can return to our normal state, that is, made in God's image and likeness, and live forever in all eternity in the new paradise, that which is heaven. That's why in our second reading, St. Paul calling on, to the church of, to the Colossians, says to them, think about what is above, not what is about what's below. Think that this is where we're heading, our journey. That the ultimate thing about Easter is that we're going to live forever with God. And no matter what trials, or tribulations, or suffering that happen here on earth can prevent that from happening. Because God himself, in the person of Jesus, has reversed the effects of sin and death in our world. When we, on Holy Thursday, processed after the Mass of the Lord's Supper, throughout the body of the church, there was a message being said. We started and went acknowledging the Stations of the Cross, whereby throughout Lent we participated by going this way all the way up to here. Now it's being reversed. And then the priest with the Blessed Sacrament goes up the center aisle and to an altar of repose, where he places the Blessed Sacrament there in what is referred to as a portal of heaven. That repository is greatly adorned purposely so that we might see the splendor and majesty of God. That is to be our true calling. That is what we hope for. That is why we take upon ourselves to follow in the footsteps of Christ. We come here today knowing that we will share in his victory as long as we're willing to suffer and die for him and others. Our prayers, our presence help defeat sin and evil in our world. It is necessary for us to understand our importance and significance, that this is not a pipe dream, that Jesus was witnesses saw Jesus risen from the dead. If you hear, Peter and the other apostles thought it was nonsense. But when they said, that is the three women, that as he promised in Galilee, that he would suffer and die and rise again, he also said those same words on Mount Tabor in front of Peter. And Peter began to think. He leaves the upper room and goes to the tomb. He peers in. He sees the burial cloth on the side. And he realizes that truth, that Jesus predicted that this would happen. And in our first reading, we hear how he is acknowledging and proclaiming that to all the people in the Acts of the Apostles. Jesus truly rose from the dead. No one could have stole his body. First of all, it'd be really difficult for somebody to roll back that stone. You need a pry bar and about 3 people to do it because it's in a channel and it has to be lifted out of the channel, rolled out of the channel. The women were saying, who's going to take care of this for us? But it was already done. If you're going to go to that trouble, you wouldn't take the linen off the dead person and carry him away. No, that linen was cast aside as Jesus cast it aside. And he, being God and all-powerful, removed the stone itself and lives. He is risen. He's no longer here. Therefore, we're called to rejoice. As Peter said, he not only witnessed him, and so too did many others, but he ate and drank with him. It cannot be a ghost because ghosts can't eat. They're just spiritual. So this bodily resurrection did indeed take place, and there's witnesses beyond that. We need to trust in the story, trust in the message, believe in what God has done. He, the author of creation, wanted so much that we could live eternally with him that he took away the sin of Adam and all sin throughout the world as he chose to give himself, his body and blood, so that we might have newness of life. Shortly, you'll celebrate that newness of life in the waters of baptism. For it is through our baptism that we suffer and die with Christ and rise with Christ in newness of life. The sprinkling rite is to remind us that we're called to live eternally, not just here on earth, that we're called to ascend into heaven and to live in joy, happiness, and peace. As St. Paul was trying to say, heaven isn't here on earth. Some might say, well, in Bavaria it's beautiful, in Hawaii it's beautiful, it's almost heaven-like. Some golfers might say, Augusta is beautiful, but nevertheless, it pales in comparison to the true Jerusalem, eternal in heaven. Allow yourselves to contemplate the majesty of God and the glory that we're called to. Don't underestimate who you are. Try to appreciate that this story, the greatest story ever told, was meant to bring us joy and happiness. Joy is being in the presence of God, and happiness is total bliss. Believe, and you shall share in the victory over sin and death. Happy Easter, everyone.